believe that resilience is the ability to bounce back in any adverse situation. But the textbook definition of resilience is an individual who is willing to take a calculated, necessary risk to capitalize on opportunity. So the purpose behind MRT is to teach you to be able to bounce and not break in adverse situations or environments. Now we're going to get into a little bit of myths that are commonly taught that are not correct. So we're commonly taught that a resilient person should never show emotion. But the truth behind that is it is okay to show emotion. You should be able to know how to balance and regulate those emotions. You don't always have to act fast. It's okay to know when you need to take it slow. The last thing I'd like to go over is it's very commonly told that a resilient person will never burn out. But rejuvenation is very important. You have to know, like I said before, when to slow down, when to take that breath, and then when to start back again. So now we're going to get into the 6 competencies concerning MRT. The first one is self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability to identify your emotions and your behaviors. During this time, you should take the time to think about those patterns, those thinking and those behavior patterns that you have, and identify those counterproductive patterns as well. It's okay to be open and be curious during this time. The next one is self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to regulate your impulses, your emotions, and behaviors in order to achieve goals. During this time, you should also be able to regulate your emotions appropriately and stop that counterproductive thinking. Optimism is number 3. Optimism allows you to be able to hunt the good stuff or hunt what's good. You're able to fight that negativity bias when you're optimistic or remain realistic. During this time, you should also be able to identify what is controllable versus what's not controllable and maintain that hope. It's also important to maintain confidence within yourself and your team. Number 4 is mental agility. Mental agility allows you to think flexibly, accurately, and thoroughly. Take other perspectives into account. Identify and understand other problems and be willing to try new strategies. Number 5 is strengths of character. Know your character strengths. Know how to use this to be able to overcome challenges and meet goals. Have faith in your talents and your character strengths and your abilities. Connections. That's something that I have to work on. So connections is the ability to build strong relationships using positive and effective communication and be willing to ask for help or support others. Develop empathy. That's very, very important. So you'll use these 6 skills you use these 6 competencies in all 12 skills towards building resilience, and this will help you to become a better person overall. You should use this to be able to cope with stress, overcome setbacks, solve problems, and remain focused. Today we're going to take the time to learn about real-time resilience and how we can apply this in our everyday life. So we use optimism in building real-time resilience. Real-time resilience involves proving your thoughts false with evidence, thinking optimistically, and by putting things into perspective. It is used to help get back at the task at hand. It helps back against those counterproductive thoughts as soon as they occur and help you to remain focused and motivated. So the purpose behind real-time resilience is to challenge those counterproductive thoughts as soon as they occur. This is an internal skill, and it takes practice. So the 3 steps in real-time resilience is using evidence, optimism, and putting it into perspective. And as I said before, it takes practice. Some common responses that we often fall into are called pitfall responses, when we dismiss the greater truth or minimize the situation or rationalize or excuse one's contribution towards the problem. This is also used to help create a weak response. When you come up with evidence, it is important to make sure that it is very factual. So some sentence starters that you can use to help incorporate real-time resilience is use evidence that help prove that thought is false. So one example is that's not completely true because, and then at this time you will identify a factual point to help mitigate that false or that counterproductive thought. You can also generate a more optimistic way of seeing things. So when something something doesn't go your way, instead of getting all negative and down on yourself, it's important to say that a more optimistic way of thinking of this is, and then you state that optimistic thought that you have, or something that can also be factual as well. So some examples that I can use or I can share so that you have a better idea of how to use those sentence starters inside of your real-time resilience is I am a big planner. I love to plan. And if I do not accomplish everything on that list or everything within that schedule, I feel like my entire day is wasted. So that's that counterproductive thought that comes into my mind automatically when it's time for me to go to bed and I realize that I didn't accomplish everything. So some examples of sentence starters that I can use is that's not entirely true. So let's say I accomplished three of the four things. Um, I can say as my hard evidence, that's not entirely true because I at least accomplished three of those four things that I made on my list, or I've at least accomplished majority of the tasks that I wanted to accomplish in that day. Another thing that I can use, or another sentence starter that I can use, is by being optimistic. I can think of instead of saying, "Well, my entire day was wasted," or "My entire day was ruined," or "Not productive enough," I can just say, "Well, tomorrow I have something to do. Like I have something that I can focus in more detail on tomorrow, and I can make it an even better day." So those are some examples of how I can use real-time resilience and those sentence starters in my personal life as well. Soon we will talk to other service members and get an idea of what first resilience is, and two, what how they use real-time resilience in their everyday lives, personally and both. But first, I would like to take the time to review or reflect on what real-time resilience is, when would you use real-time resilience, and how do you use it. So real-time resilience is an internal skill used to shut down those counterproductive thinking and help to build motivation and optimism. It is also used to focus at the task at hand. When would you use real-time resilience? You would use real-time resilience when your thoughts are distracting you from accomplishing a goal or a task at hand. And how do you use real-time resilience? You use real-time resilience by responding to those counterproductive thoughts in the heat of the moment by providing evidence, optimism, and positivity, and by putting things into perspective so that you can accomplish that goal. Also, remember to be sure to restrain from those pitfall responses. Okay, good evening, and thank you all for joining me on this real-time resilience MRT training that we have right now. So can you all introduce yourselves?
Good evening. My name is Miles Ibanez. I'm active duty sergeant, United States Marine Corps.
Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, I'm Specialist Martin, Army Reserve.
Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Anya's Sergeant, Active Reserve.
All right, thank you all for joining us. So today we're talking about real-time resilience, and we're trying to figure out how everybody, although in different components, can use real-time resilience in their everyday life. So we spoke a little bit about what MRT was in the past video. You guys were able to see that video. So can y'all tell me what comes to your mind when you hear the word resilience?
Resilience to me is more so adaptability, your your way of actually trying to change and adapt to the circumstances at hand.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would pretty much agree with that and just add that I also look at it as, I guess, your ability to kind of just survive different obstacles or challenges in life.
Okay, does anybody else have anything about that?
I would say it was more about your ability to bounce back in any given situation.
Yeah. So I'd agreed with all of that. I believe that resilience is the ability to bounce back under stressful or harsh environments, the ability to adapt and overcome quickly. Okay, so I know y'all seen in the video we were talking about some of the myths that we hear when you identify somebody as being resilient. Feel that you don't have to have emotions, or you have to have everything composed all the time, or you feel like everything has to be together. Is that some things that you all know, or some things that y'all was taught as well as far as resilience goes?
I apologize. Can you repeat that? It's starting to echo just a little bit.
So I mentioned that there's a lot of myths that we spoke about earlier as far as why, well, like identifying people who are resilient. So oftentimes we believe that resilient people have to always have it together, or resilient people do not have to show emotion. Those are some myths that we kind of spoke about before. Were y'all taught the same things, or do you believe that it's okay to show emotion, but you just have to learn to regulate them, or you just have to learn to keep them balanced? Or what are some things, were y'all taught those same things?
Interesting question. To answer that, I submit to you two things. Uh, it's a different culture in the Marine Corps, so they preach resiliency. Adaptability is our number one objective. No matter what the circumstances we're in, we have to be able to adapt and overcome. Um, so to answer your question, yes. And when I think of resilient Marine, I think of one who he's the man or woman with the plan. He or she's doing what they need to be doing. They always know what's going on at all given times. However, that is a misconception that I've learned as I've grown through the Corps, and through deployments. And I've seen my both subordinates and my superiors uh, sometimes run around and they don't necessarily have the plan and they're going as it's coming. Um, Resiliency is more so towards, when I think of resiliency, I think of General Mattis's book, Call Sign Chaos, where he talks about it's not necessarily about having the plan, but being able to, I guess, overcome the obstacles at hand.
That's very good. Does anybody have anything else? So you pretty much covered my next question, where I was going to ask, what do you think are some key ingredients towards building resilience? So you mentioned being able to adapt and overcome, um, being flexible, pretty much. So you guys pretty much answered that question. Okay, so then we'll go into optimism. What do you all believe that optimism is? What does optimism mean to you?
Optimism to me is being positive regardless of the situation, um, being able to overcome negativity. As a leader, you're going to deal with a lot of pessimistic people, a lot of people that don't have the same values and leadership styles as you. I was always taught that even with the person that you may dislike or not agree with the most, you're always able to turn it into a learning experience for you, because you take the bad with the good. Whatever you don't want them, whatever you did not like about their leadership skills, you're able to apply it to your life and make sure that you're not that same type of leader towards somebody else. So in the Marine Corps, we're always taught to look at, be more optimistic and look at the brighter side of things, because we can sit there and be pessimistic all day long, but the grass is not always green on the other side. So
That's true. Do you have anything, Martin?
So just kind of building from that, when I think of optimism, especially when we just spoke about resiliency, um, not everyone who's resilient may be optimistic, but I think all people who are optimistic have to be resilient, because it's more so a mind frame of, okay, I'm facing whatever challenge, whatever task may be at hand. And when things are getting difficult, when the road is rough, being able to still have a sense of, either by the resources and your own capabilities can help you achieve a goal, or knowing that somewhere down the road, you'll be able to get to where you need to be.
That's true. That is definitely true. So I know for me, one big thing when I think of optimism, it takes me back to basic training. when we were in the field, and a lot of the people around me, they kept thinking, we just got out here, we just got out here. But for me, something that helped me to get through it was realizing that because we're out here, we're almost done. So instead of me having that negative mindset, I just, every morning I woke up like, okay, this is another day. This is another day. We're getting through this. We're moving through this. It could always be worse. And that's something that I tell myself every time I go through a situation. I have to realize that it's not, first of all, it's not always about me. And second of all, it can always be, I can always be in a worse situation than I'm in. So that helps me to remain optimistic at all times. So that was good, guys. So what are some areas in your life that you believe that could use a bit more optimism, or what are some areas in your life that you believe that you can apply real-time resilience? So we spoke about real-time resilience as being able to use optimism and evidence to counteract a counterproductive thought, right? So for example, something takes place. It's not always the best scenario or the best situation that you'd like to be in, but instead of drowning in that negativity, you then have to come up with hard evidence and use optimism to be able to move forward in that. So what are some situations that you guys think you've been in, or some areas in your life that you can actually apply real-time resilience in your life?
So I'll give a personal experience. Transitioning out of the Marine Corps, as we discussed earlier. With me, it was more so of I had the options, rather I had been directed that I'd be either going to the drill field or go recruiting or get out. And I was trying to pursue my education, and I knew that my education is what I've always been pursuing in the long run. So for me, it was more so trying to stay resilient and trying to stay optimistic about the situation, because getting out, as we know, as I've been in the Marine Corps since I graduated high school, that's all I've known is paid the bills. It's got my insurance and everything and all that. So leaving the Corps and the institution that I love so dearly, it was a difficult decision for me. But as I started to get with my mentors and I started to get with other people who's already done the transition and started to build a community around me, I think I started to see the light better. Um, I will always be a Marine, and I love the Corps. It's instilled into me, but moving forward, it's bettering myself. And now that I know, like how you have that experience when you're in the field, it's the same thing. It's okay. Well, I start terminal soon, so okay, what's the plan? How do I get ahead? How does school start? Where do I start with their Emory is coming up? They have this to do, this to do, this to do. I know where I want to go. And now it's just about having a plan and being persistent and consistent about what I want to do. So I think for me, that's real time resiliency and optimism.
So you spoke about how you're getting out of the military and terminals coming soon. So what are some counterproductive thoughts that you experience? So what I mean by counterproductive thoughts, I mean like, okay, I'm getting out the military. Oh, like what are some, it's kind of like fears, or what are some things that first came to your head that weren't the brightest, weren't the most positive? And what are some things that you had to say to yourself? What are some hard facts, hard evidence? And what are some optimistic words that you had to say to yourself to keep yourself moving one at a time? One day at a time?
Wow, there's a lot that went through my mind. Fears, pay, insurance, um, housing, you know, am I going to make it? Being around civilians for the first time, because that's as silly as that may sound, it's a culture shock. You know, being around active duty Marines, it's a culture. It's not just it's no crap a lifestyle, you know, and the way we act, the way we talk, the way we interact with one another, it's not the same on the civilian side. And I've seen that, and it's been a fear of mine. Am I going to be able to fit in? Am I going to be able to, I guess, induct myself into this lifestyle that I want to be a part of? Do I have the proper grammar? Because I'm learning on, you know, not using profanity, not using the stuff that's so normal in our culture, so normal in our lifestyle every day. The way I dress, the way I, you know, like this uniform, it's more than just a lifestyle. So there were so many fears, and I think the big three was health insurance. you know. And then with COVID hitting at the worst time possible, I'm thinking of getting out of, not thinking, but I am getting out of the Marine Corps to go pursue higher education, to go get the law degree, and, you know, to get out during the time of unemployment rising, during a time of all this hatred going on, during a time of, it's so many fears I was going through my mind. And it was like, am I making a wise decision? I'm about to pick up, if I stayed in, I'll pick up staff sergeant. I'll be an E6. I'm a young staff sergeant. I'll be a 25-year-old staff sergeant. You know, I only got 3 more ranks. I go out to the recruiting field. I do perfectly fine. I come back as a gunny, you know. So career-wise, I do 20 years. I retire at 38, and then I can pursue education at 38. Is that really a big difference? You know, so it was so many things I was counterproductive to what I wanted to do. And it was just like, well, if I delay it now, that's just going to delay what I really want to do later, you know. And I'm never going to really know, did I have what it takes to make it? Did I have that oomph to pursue? And am I going to be triumphant, or am I going to fail? And learning and getting my mentors and having them teach me, like, hey, you're going to fail. You're absolutely going to fail at certain things. There's no problem. It's not a problem. It's how you deal with failure.
So what are some positive thoughts that some positive words or some facts that you had to use to help counteract those counterproductive thoughts? Like you mentioned, you're getting into Emory. You know, you mentioned that you have a plan. You mentioned some good positive things that you have going for yourself that can help get you focused out of that negative mindset, but back into, this is the task at hand. This is what's happening. This is how I can move forward. This is how I can remain positive and be optimistic. So what are some hard facts that you started to use to counteract that counterproductive thoughts?
So for me, it was more so getting with my mentors, because they're older. I have a couple colonels that has been putting me under their wing, and it's just, they have the experience. With age comes experience, and they're successful out in the civilian sector, you know. So them teaching me about finances, the Dave Ramsey program, them teaching me about, you know, like, hey, this is the way that you're thinking of things, but I need you to start changing your mindset. And they're showing me, you know, being available to have that in my life. You know, it's been a blessing. Also, meditation. Definitely started to think a lot. I mean, I lost a lot of hours of sleep, a lot of nights where I was just like really frustrated. You know, prayer definitely got me through too. Maybe a lot of people aren't, you know, into that, but if you are, it definitely helped me as well. So those are what really helped me out.
Okay. So we also have you, Martin. So what are some things that you're using to help those negative thoughts? What are you using? What's going on with you?
And if you don't mind, just specify for just in general.
Whatever you'd like.
Okay. Well, as was just mentioned, meditation, that's something I've taken in about 2 years ago. So I've really been trying to always reflect and meditate on anything that's going on. So, of course, I have similar concerns as far as with the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. I also want to further my education, looking at grad schools. And even though the programs I looked at mostly, you know, would be online, it's the small concerns of, okay, if there's a chance I do want to run in, you know, take things into consideration, when to start school, when to delay. Are they providing funding and scholarships, with a lot of people dropping out, et cetera. And same thing for the career field, just looking at who's hiring. I know I've seen a lot of reports of jobs being available, or are those the type of fields where I can actually pursue a career? There are a lot of like lower level, low skill jobs, but not so much for things that I'm interested in. So to kind of keep myself in a positive and optimistic headspace, I just meditate. Sometimes I write things down, or I'm a talker, so I'll talk with close loved ones, friends, and kind of just talk out where my head is at, what I want to do versus what I'm doing at that time, what it takes to get there. And at any point where I may be feeling down or, you know, pessimistic, I'll try to put things into perspective. So, okay, where are you right now? What safety nets do I have in place, etc. So really just kind of thinking things out and kind of taking a moment to step away from whatever I'm pursuing, and really reflect on it has been really helpful for me.
Hmm. Those are some good ones. Do you have anything to add, May?
I would say for him, it was getting out. For me, it would be staying in. Um, I originally did want to get out and pursue a different career path for myself, especially being dual military. A lot of the fears that I had was being dual military. Would I be separated from my family? How would I be able to provide not just financially for my child, but for stability reasons, or being there for her, or supporting her and encouraging her? Would I be able to, instead of having to rely on other people and other like daycare and everything like that, to be able to raise her? Am I going to be that one to make an impression into her life and instill some type of discipline? How will I be able to balance things as far as going to school, which, I'm in school now, and being a mother and dealing with the Marine Corps, because it's not just about being in the Marine Corps and just going to a job 9 to 5. Like, I'm constantly taking care of other Marines, my junior Marines. They're like my kids too. And it's something that I'm constantly doing on and off work. It's like you're working all the time, having to stay up with PT, or balancing my marriage. It's a lot of different things that I had to take into consideration when making the decision to stay in, and a lot of doubts that I did have. But I chose to give the Marine Corps another 4 years and try to focus on balance and writing things down and planning ahead and being able to focus on the more important thing, even, and putting myself and my selfishness, aside, and what I wanted to do aside, because I can't just focus on myself. I have a daughter too.
So you guys all mentioned things associated with another skill set as well, which I'm sure in the future we'll talk about, which is putting things into perspective. But with real-time resiliency, you are pretty much using optimism, you're using evidence, and then you are putting things into perspective so that you can get back focused at the task at hand. So I do appreciate you all acknowledging that and using that in your everyday lives. So you guys already mentioned some things about COVID. So COVID is a big game changer for all of us. I'd like to kind of get in your mind and try to figure out how have y'all been dealing with it? And I can say from myself, from experience. So some counterproductive thoughts that I had was, it's always going to be like this. I'm never going to try. I had big dreams this year. I was supposed to be traveling and doing my thing, so I had really big dreams. And when COVID took place, at first I was one of those was, it's going to blow over. But then when it got really serious, I started to get into those negative thoughts. And I started to think, well, I'm never going to be able to travel, or I'm never going to be able to do this, or like this is the new normal. Like that's the kind of mindset that I started having. So some things that I had to use to help acknowledge real-time resilience was I had to start acknowledging the facts. Like, okay, yes, this has happened for a good period of time. However, they've been able to find antibiotics and treatment before, when crazy things has happened before. So this shouldn't be any different. We had Ebola and all those other things that came and it went. So that kind of helps me to put things into perspective and to kind of counteract those counterproductive thoughts so that I can move forward. Do y'all have any experience with any of that? Like, what are y'all telling yourselves every day to move forward with this whole COVID thing happening? What's happening? What are y'all using? What's working for you?
So for me, I live alone. It's just me. I have the only other living things here are 2 plants, and they're barely making it. So when we got into the height of the lockdowns, curfews, and quarantines, it was just a lot of free time. And I think the biggest challenge I've had has been, how am I using it? One part is, oh, you have all this extra time now. You should come out of the other end of this pandemic with like this product or this thing achieved. And then other times it's kind of just, after a while, it's kind of draining, just energy and spiritual wise, to where, okay, you're sitting around here, you spend a lot of time at home, not really around as many people as I'm used to. So then it was kind of like, okay, well, day by day, just kind of going through the motions. So what I've had to focus on is, no matter if I have or I'm trying to achieve this big long term goal, uh, or even if I'm just trying to uh, just manage my day by day activities when I'm doing my routine. I focused on whether this pandemic is going to be extended for many months to come, or if things could kind of start going back to what we consider normal within just the next few months or so, just to make sure that I would be satisfied and pleased with how I carried myself throughout. And that's really the only thing I've kind of been focusing on. Because I want to travel. By now, I would have been to about 4 different states and probably out the country. But all that was canceled, of course. So now just kind of managing expectation and reality. So I've used this time, I talked about school earlier. I finally solidified where I want to go, what program, start the application process, working on some other skills, just taking up on reading again.
Keeping yourself busy. Okay. So some skill building that we can use as far as real-time resilience, and we're going to start to wrap it up here, is anytime you feel like you're having an event happens, and you feel like you're having these counterproductive thoughts, some sentence starters that you can use is, that's not completely true because this. And when you analyze a situation, you realize this is what's happening, but then when you start thinking about those facts or those or evidence that you have that can help to counteract those thoughts, you at that point, that's not completely true because, like what you said, Miles, you said, I got accepted into Emory. I have really good mentors. What you said, you mentioned you were had a lot of time at home. You were by yourself. It wasn't normal to you because you're used to being around a lot of people. So you start thinking you're lonely, right? Let's just say. And you can say, well, that's not completely true because I have my plants here. I've been able to use skill. I've been able to improve on certain skills. I've been able to use my time wisely and be very productive with all this free time that I have. You mentioned, Naomi, that you were willing to, yours wasn't so much getting out, but yours was staying in. And you're thinking, how can I be this great mother, this great student, this great wife, or this great partner, and you're trying to think of ways that you're starting to think somewhat negative because it is a lot. It can be a lot. Everybody, all of y'all situation is a lot to handle, but you were able to make the decision to stay in because you realize, well, that's not, I'm able to balance all of those different things. I mean, I've gotten this far. I'm almost done with school. I'm a great wife. I'm an outstanding mother. I know, because, you know, but I appreciate how you all were able to use these facts and the positivity to be able to counteract those negative thoughts. So with us wrapping things up, and now y'all have a better understanding of what real-time resilience is, how do you think you can use real-time resilience in the future in your everyday life? Like even tomorrow, even tonight, once we get off this phone call, like how can you use real-time resilience in your everyday life, or continue to use real-time resilience in your everyday life?
So I'll chime in. I think Naomi was trying to jump in, but I'll be brief with this one. I think it goes back to the adaptability, like how Martin, I apologize if I said it wrong, but how Martin said, he would have traveled here. You said you mentioned the travel and all that. I think it would have more so been towards getting used to the norm being what it is now and having to change your mindset to now, okay, well, I may not be able to travel, so I need to find a new hobby that's going to keep me entertained and it's just changing the mindset and adapting and overcoming. But I'll let Melanie to finish it up.
Okay.
No, you hit it right on the nail. Definitely by being flexible and making your life like a rubber band, bending it whichever way that it needs to go, and keeping a positive mindset and on the end goal and just accomplishing it. A lot of the times, like we shock ourselves with the amount of stuff that we can actually accomplish and learn and take the downtime to do. And that's exactly what a lot of our negativity can be turned into, and what we have been turning it into. So I definitely agree with you.
You have anything, Martin?
Just saying, just moving forward, as you touched on, just focusing on how we may feel, what our emotions are in relation to reality. Just putting everything into perspective and then working with that, which again ties back into that resilience and being opportunistic, being able to not only weather whatever storms of life, but also keeping a positive outlook.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Y'all have a wonderful evening, and we'll reach out to each other soon. Bye.